Aloha, and welcome to a conversation about the film Waikiki. Thanks for joining us. My name is Correa, and I serve as a curator on the Mother Tongue Film Festival and at the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center. This program is presented as a part of the 2021 Mother Tongue Film Festival, The Healing Power of Storytelling. The festival this year is taking place entirely online and is designed to highlight the work of language revitalization around the world and the crucial world of languages in our daily lives. If you don't know the Mother Tongue Film Festival, I encourage you to check out mothertongue.si.edu to learn more about our films, events, educational resources, and more. I'm truly excited to be speaking with Christopher Kahunahana, the director of the film Waikiki, and his colleagues, whom you'll meet in the next few moments. They are joining us from the beautiful island of Oahu. It is now my pleasure to welcome guests, director Christopher Kahunahana, lead actor Danielle Zalopany, and producer Nicole Naone. Welcome.
Mahalo.
Aloha.
Good morning.
Aloha. Good morning. So I have a few questions for you folks. We'll start off this morning here in beautiful Hawaii. We'll start with you, Christopher. Would you be able to tell us what is the inspiration behind the film Waikiki?
Waikiki came about, it's kind of pulled from a lot of my life experiences. I had been working in Chinatown, Honolulu, and the characters are based on people that I met and formed relationships with in the Chinatown neighborhood. But I think a lot of the inspiration was just from the people of Hawaii, growing up in Hawaii, seeing what's happening to Hawaii because of overdevelopment and depletion of our resources or misuse of our resources, and how it affects people in Hawaii, how it affects our communities, our families, our mental stability. And I think the film grew out of the combination of seeing it happen in the neighborhood and me as a filmmaker artist wanting to say something about it.
Fantastic. Okay. My next question I have right here is for you, Danielle. It's about what films have inspired you as an actor?
Gosh, it's more like moments in films, not so much a whole film in general. I mean, I definitely actresses. One of my favorites is Regina King. I love that she is a woman of color, and the different roles that she plays express everything about who she is or what her culture is. It would probably be in that vein of actresses that I appreciate.
Oh, beautiful. I'm going to throw it again too back to you, Chris. So as a director, what are the types of films that have inspired you that have led to the film Waikiki or have given you a background?
Well, actually, when I started writing the film, I had conceived it as a story about the relationship between two characters, Wo and Kea. And so at the time, I was really inspired by The Lovers on the Bridge by Leo Croix. It's two characters. One's homeless and the other one, she's going blind. And I think that relationship was really interesting to me. I also was, at the time, really into the film Scarecrow. It was Al Pacino. And it was about two people kind of down on their luck and them getting together. So it was kind of like odd pairings. Also, I think story-wise, I was really attracted to, this just sounds weird, but it was The Fox and the Hound. It's because there were, people from different sides, different characters who didn't seem to have anything in common or supposed to have been antagonistic towards each other, found some kind of common ground. And I found it very beautiful. And I kind of thought if I could find ways to have the characters in Waikiki find those similarities among each other, then I could, have people feel that as people, we don't always know what someone's going through, and possibly we could create the empathy to the characters towards each other, and then hopefully by that the audience can feel empathy for the characters.
Oh, fantastic. The next question I have is for Danielle. So Hawaiian language plays a critical role in the film at key points. And would you be able to reflect on the role and the specific scene in which Kea is teaching at Halau Kumana, and what that meant to you, or what you were trying to convey in that scene?
Well, that day in itself was an amazing day of filming. When we started, we actually, I think the school asked us to start the day with them. So we were there, I think maybe about 6 or 7 in the morning, and, you know, crew was setting up, and the way the school starts is the entire school gathers, and it's almost like a morning ceremony. And it was wonderful to be involved, because I got to get into the great headspace of what institutions like that try to perpetuate with their children. They started off, one of the teachers told this story about how it's not just one person in a village that's responsible for the outcome. It's everyone in the village. It's about being held accountable. And she was saying it because of something that had happened, I guess, earlier in the week. And just seeing all these children be able to ōlelo, and I mean, it was a beautiful experience. I remember actually crying that morning and trying it. I was just filled with so much pride, and I'm incredibly grateful to Chris for putting pieces like this in the film for the world to see, because they should know that we do have a culture, and it is being kept alive. And it's through the efforts of people that are striving to instill values into a younger generation. So that day, I'm incredibly grateful that it's in the film, and I'm incredibly grateful to Chris for, you know, writing that into it.
Oh, thank you so much for that answer. Mahalo. Yeah, so I guess going off of that, the next question I have is going to be for Nicole. And so my question here is, so the themes in Waikiki paint a very different reality of Hawaii than is generally seen on the screen. Could you comment on why it was important to show that different depiction of a perceived paradise that is normally shown on films that are recorded in Hawaii, Nicole?
Absolutely. I think for Chris and for all of us, it was always essentially about holding up a mirror, and a lot of the way that this film came together, you know, really does have a large part to do with our mother tongue and the tragic relationship that we've had with it. For example, even the title Waikiki, when you're speaking of that space in the English language, we put the diacriticals over the 2 I's, because that place name translates to Wai, freshwater, Kiki, which is essentially this motion, because it used to be a swamplands that provided food for so much of the South Shore. And because that no longer exists, even within our title, we chose not to have kahako over the I, because we're not even speaking about this space, because that space no longer exists. It's been completely desecrated and is now covered with hotels. And so even the language of using our words in this sort of construct to even show that when people even speak or depict Waikiki, it's not even related to what that space is. That name talks about fresh water springing forth, which it doesn't anymore. And so it was important for us to depict and show the difference between Waikiki a Hawaiian word depicting a space where fresh water bubbles up versus Waikiki TM or Waikiki, the brand. We wanted to really discuss that construct and that marketing more than anything else, and how much the lack of fresh water has now created this perverse space, which is Waikiki.
Thank you for that answer.
Yeah, the major themes that we want to keep running through the film is it's fresh water. So water's life, basically. And so in the beginning of the film, we show the clouds, in the ocean, the clouds, the wall, the ōlelo. And in the film, the water doesn't reach the ocean like it should. Cycle, right? The freshwater Waikiki cycle, which creates all life. But because of the development of Waikiki, they stopped the water's flow. So you know, see that water ends in Waikiki, ends up in the ōlelo, and that ōlelo is just like a sewage trap. Actually, the water, the fresh water does still come out. When I was paddling for Unwilling, if you go out into the ocean, there's places in the reef where the water still comes through. The fresh water comes through, and you can feel it when you're paddling over it. If the water's more dense, it's colder. And but because of the stoppage, that cloggage, to create a place for them to sell tourism and this vacation experience and the overdevelopment of Waikiki, I feel that it kind of mirrors the trajectory of the Hawaiian people. It's like if we separate ourselves from the natural flow, our connection to nature, and the commodification of our culture and nature really leaves people in a state where that disconnection creates a lot of issues within our communities, not only in the Hawaiian community, but in a lot of communities. You know, we need to return to the land. Like, and if we lose that connection and that importance, which is those values are, you know, come forth in our language, right? And if you don't, you know, respect the language, and we don't perpetuate the language, and with that language comes values, and those value systems aren't held, you know, to the place that they need to be. So that's why it was so important for us to include that scene with Danielle in the halau kumana, which was he ali ka aina he kawake kanaka, which is, you know, the land is the chief, the people are just the servants, right? And I think that was the bigger theme that was underlying the whole film. It's like that was kind of what was most important about that.
Oh, thank you for that answer. I'm gonna jump back to Nicole and ask her this question here, which is Native Hawaiians have a long and rich tradition of storytelling. And why do you feel that it's taken so long for a film like Waikiki to be made? And what do you see as some of the barriers for producing and filmmaking in Hawaii?
Thank you for that question. That's such a great question. I think that the question in and of itself sort of assumes certain things that I think that at least I know for Chris and I, we don't necessarily subscribe to. So, I mean, I would like to even start with, not to get too esoteric, but how the relativity of time to begin with. You know, if we're talking about, if we zoom out a bit and look at, you know, the kuleana of being a Hawaiian and being servants of this land and being a part of a continuum in which we are essentially protectors of this beautiful space, and how our very DNA and blood and ancestors are of this space. When you realize that you're a part of a continuum that starts, you know, if you want to go Kumulipo route with Po and darkest and all of that, time becomes quite, the concept of it in and of itself is so malleable and silly that us being a little blip on the radar in terms of like coming out with a film, that coming sooner or quicker, or did it take too much time? I feel like it's always the correct time. The time that it comes out is the time that it's supposed to come out. And it's about tapping into and being inspired by and connected to nature and our common ancestor at all times, so that you can sort of understand and feel when is the correct time. And you know, for example, this film was almost at its completion. But when the protection of Mauna Kea popped off for the second time, Chris and I chose to stop everything with the film. We can't be making a film that's essentially speaking on connecting to land when a protest is happening, literally doing that and not participate in it in real life. And so when and it was like common sense, like, of course we will pause this film and go, you know what I mean? It's in terms of, you know, barriers to filmmaking and stuff. I think that, you know, we face the same challenges as any occupied space, as any colonized space. It's all matching charts and graphs across the board of what happens to a community and to a people when you occupy or colonize the space. All those things are true for Hawaiians as well. The creative community slips. There's domestic violence, there's drug use, there's mental illness. All of those things are, they're commonplace at this point whenever you occupy a country. And so even within those sorts of spaces, I think we've always chosen to operate from a less linear timeline and be more in a space of just having an allegiance to the land and to the elements, and making sure that we're on that timeline. You know, an industry's timeline is irrelevant. The timeline that I think is important to us is, you know, what's our land saying it needs? What are the narratives that it's trying to communicate? And how do we make sure that we have an allegiance to that and operate more in that timeline than anything else, for sure.
Oh, mahalo for that.
Yeah.
For that answer. I'm going to jump back to Danielle right now and sort of ask a question that I was just thinking about, which was, you as an actor in this, how did it feel portraying a Native Hawaiian woman that was basically going through so much and having so much trouble, and that idea of sort of exposing this backside of what, like, looks different from the outside, from the happy Native narrative? Like, for you, was it a difficult role as an actor to really sort of explore someone that is suffering in that way?
It was very scary. Emotionally, there were some themes that we explored that, you know, and I don't think it's so much about being a Native Hawaiian woman. It's also about being a woman. Like, that's what I appreciated about the story, is it's very universal. What I do appreciate about it being set here is it's a lot of elements that people deal with every day. I mean, you know, the struggling to pay the rent, the working multiple jobs, the trying to decide what's the best way for you to live. That's very current because of how expensive it is to live here. But the acting side, I felt very fortunate to work with Chris. He made sure that it was a very protected world. And even though I felt terrified at times, I knew there was no way I was going to go too far where I wasn't going to be able to be pulled back. And another wonderful thing about this whole process is there was always a break in the world. So no matter what we did that day, we always stopped with going to grab pizza or eating, or just, you know, some way to signify that this was Waikiki and this is returning to my life. which I totally think is, I don't know if he did it on purpose or if it was unintentional, but whatever it was, I'm incredibly grateful for that, because it was a nice way to slip away from that. But I also felt incredibly honored, you know, for the first film by a Native Hawaiian writer director, and it's primarily focused on a female's perspective. I just hope there's more things like that out there.
Oh, thank you so much for that answer. So riffing off that too, I guess I'll jump back to you, Christopher, and can you give me your vision on what the future of filmmaking by Native Hawaiians in Hawaii might look like going forward, or maybe in that greater canon of Pacific films that are starting to really starting to be shown, you know, and the voices in the Pacific being shown. What would you like the future to look like for that creative industry?
Well, it's like Nicole was saying, although the medium is film, it's like our ōlelo, our storytelling, our ōlelo, and that's how we share our culture. So it's like, this is just an example of us adapting to new media. It's like what we use now. So like, I think there's two languages while I'm making a film, I'm learning two languages simultaneously. Like a film like this, I'm learning more about my Hawaiian culture, the things that I value. How do I explain that to people? So I find it's like introspective, where I dive into myself and I try and figure out, like, why are these things bothering me? Why are these things important? And then on the other language, it's the language of film, you know, and it's amazing because there's so many talented filmmakers here. People have really picked up the camera and picked up the technology, and you know, they're doing great. They're great storytellers already, but now they're also getting versed and learning the language of film. And I think I am really hopeful, and I know there's at least a couple of other feature films coming out within the next few years from Hawaii. I think it's in terms of the independent film scene here, I think it's hit a critical mass. So it's like you said, people are recognizing our indigenous communities for the stories that we tell, and they're appreciating seeing the world through our lens. So I think on the global scale, that's helping, you know, the people who've been trying to make films for so long. Now there's a place for those films to be shown, you know, like Mother Son Film Festival, for instance. When we, you know, that valuing of the things that we already do, and that's having a avenue to premiere and promote it at, it really helps, I think, steady people's ambitions. So it's like they want to do more. They think there's more opportunity for them. And I think hopefully what I'm seeing is in the state of Hawaii, which has always been like Hollywood's backdrop, the one thing that's kind of holding back people from being able to produce feature films is some kind of funding mechanism. And, you know, like in Canada, they have a Canadian Film Fund that helps fund Native filmmakers. And in New Zealand, they have film funds that help fund Maori filmmakers. In Hawaii, we don't really have anything similar to that for fictional films. And I think I could foresee it happening where a part of the tax that's comes from all the Hollywood films, taking just a small percentage of it and, you know, earmarking it for Kanaka Maoli filmmakers, I think would really help the industry and get it to a place where we could expect like a feature film from our communities like every year, every 2 years. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that answer. We are going to wrap it up now. I would like to, though, ask all of you, is there anything that you would like to say further about the film Waikiki, or your views on filmmaking in Hawaii or acting in Hawaii?
Yes. We just want to make sure that we definitely really stay positive, and we note that we are very much so appreciative and happy about the way the scene is going. In terms of other countries, What's tricky about Hawaii is because we are a country within a country. So there does become certain obstacles in that way when some people consider us a state and some people consider us a nation. And I think that, you know, mostly we are extremely grateful to people who have supported us and who have been trailblazers in ways to really support our project. And we definitely hope that it will facilitate even more a greater culture of funding creative projects. And art, you know, art is definitely, unfortunately, something that gets put on the back burner. I mean, even when you look at the public school system, it's like art, music, PE gets cut immediately. And I think that within just going for it and speaking up for what you believe in and making projects and allowing for those things to come out, it you know, it makes me very proud, and it's very humbling to know that we can be a part of this continuum in order to have more amazing creative things come out of Hawaii, because it's definitely a space that is so talented. There are amazing stories here, and there's amazingly talented people here. And so it creates definitely a very hopeful space for Hawaii filmmaking. And we're definitely excited to even just be a part of that at all.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that last insight and thought, because you know, as someone that participates teaching kids in the film industry and creative industries here, I feel the same exact way. We have untapped creative talent here that is just waiting to roar out the gates. So mahalo for that.
Totally.
So I think that's all the questions I have for you folks today. I'd like to thank the artists, Christopher Kahunahana, Danielle Zalopany, and Nicole Naone for participating in the Mother Tongue Film Festival and of the questions that I've asked. And I know there's so many more, and I'm just so proud of everybody here. And just go and watch a film. It's completely amazing in my opinion, and I loved every moment of it. So thank you to all of you for this. Follow the Mother Tongue page here on Facebook to get notifications about future events, and also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Visit our website at mothertongue.si.edu and come back here for our next program and future events.